Today's guest, Hannah Cooper, built the role from the ground up after coming from project management to the BRM by chance. Shaped by her strong partner-focused style, Hannah explains to us the importance of the BRM role in ensuring relationship management isn't just transactional, warning us not to lose our organic conversations, because if we do, we won't just damage our relationships, but also miss out on key insights into business progression. She debunks the common misconception that you need to be a subject matter expert to become a BRM. It's about knowing how to redirect work and taking a team-focused approach. We hear how the BRM role is key in challenging the norm on crucial topics ranging from data management, environmental impacts to co-benefits, and why Hannah's advice to anyone starting in the role would be to make sure you're asking questions that lead to progressive change and you have the confidence to do so. Welcome to this episode of Implementing Best Practice in Business. We're here to help you and your organisation understand and implement global best practice to help you face the business challenges of today. Join me, Richard Pharro, CEO of APMG International, in talking to leaders and practitioners who have applied these frameworks and practices to boost their productivity. They're here, willing to share their knowledge and experience to help you learn from them so you can do the same to make you more competitive in today's market. My guest today is Hannah Cooper. Hannah is an IT business partner for the National Lottery Community Fund, but before joining she held virtually every role in a programme management office for a £30 million digital transformation programme in an academic setting. The insights she gained in ensuring you have a clear technology strategy, appropriate project and change management procedures, and importantly a strong partnering approach has shaped her approach to delivering successful outcomes. She is passionate about working with people to help everyone succeed in their role. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you. It's lovely to hear from you again, Richard.
Hannah, so can you just tell me a little bit about how you came to be in the BRM role?
Yes, so as you said at the beginning of this, I spent quite a lot of my time within digital transformation. So I worked in a program management office, and it was actually just by chance, I suppose. I know that's a word that people don't like to use sometimes because it implies luck and things, but it was something that I didn't even know existed. So at the time I was a project manager, and although I was learning lots of things about project management and change management and working with people, and because it was in a technology context, I was learning a lot about technology from my technology colleagues who had specific skills in that area. I was really missing people. I was missing working with people. Before becoming a project manager, I was in an engagement and communication officer role where I was across the whole of the higher education organisation I was working at. And I used to talk to people about all sorts of things, about how they felt about change, about how the projects were going, about how we could roll things out. And although I was still doing some interaction with people, I just missed that little bit extra. And then the business partner role came up as an advertisement, and it almost felt like it was the perfect opportunity. I read the job description and I was like, oh, this plays into my strengths. This is something I'm really interested in. It was all about, partnering with people. It was created off the back of a restructure. So it was about changing the reputation of how IT was being seen within the organisation and working towards a new strategy. And that's how I ended up getting into it. Was I identified that I was missing something a little bit, and then it just happened to come up at the exact time, and I applied for it, and I've now been here for nearly 3 years.
Do you need to know much about the technology to be a BRM? Or is it really about people and engagement and teasing out from them what's required? Or do you need to be a bit of a subject matter expert yourself?
I think it's a really difficult one. I don't think you need to be a subject matter expert in technology. I think you need to know who you've got around you that you can pass those things to and how you can redirect work. The one thing I will say is it's really important. I wouldn't have been able to go straight into business partnering if I hadn't got that experience of working, I don't think, within the IT context. So although I'm not a technical person, actually knowing how technology operationally runs, strategically runs, how projects are run in that area gave me a really good insight to then build my knowledge bank, I suppose, to be able to bring into that role. But in terms of the actual technical skills, I don't personally think so. I think if somebody has them and they choose to come into it, it could almost, in a way, and I'm not saying this people shouldn't, but it could actually cause potential blockers down the line, because if you've got too much information, you can start to solutionize in a way that doesn't always work with the rest of the team. So when people come to me with ideas, I try really hard, even though sometimes I've got ideas to solution, I try really hard not to throw solutions at them. I try and do a very much communication, listening sessions to understand what their actual needs are, so that I can take those away and talk to my colleagues who can then look at all angles, look how this fits in with the rest of our infrastructure, look at how it fits into with the rest of the strategy, rather than trying to make a decision on the spot as to what I think the solution is.
But if it's a people-facing role, if it's a people engagement role, how have you coped over the last couple of years when we've all been working from home in the course of the pandemic? Is there any different techniques you apply when you're connecting with people online, on Zoom? How do you find that? Does it work for a people person like yourself?
It can be difficult. I think what I've personally found, and actually I've spoken to a lot of people who are in similar roles in other organisations who found the same, is it's the organic conversations that struggle. I think when you've got a specific thing to talk to somebody about, or they've got a specific thing to talk to you about, then you can continue to have the same working relationship that you have had. Or if people have joined the organisation in the time during the pandemic state, or you've not met people, I think there are ways and means to introduce yourself to them virtually using the technology available. But yeah, I think it's the organic conversation, the whole water cooler thing when you go into the kitchen, walking through the halls, those sort of waiting for the doors, where you just bump into people and happen to have a conversation. It's an approach that I've always taken to how I work with people anyway, is still making it about the people. I think obviously that has to be reciprocated. You don't want to make someone uncomfortable by prying into their personal life as such. But if you're only focusing things on work conversations, then they become extremely transactional conversations. And then when you do reach out for another purpose, it's almost like people are waiting to know what you're going to ask them rather than just generally checking in. So I think something that I've made sure that I've continued to do, because I did this in real life and virtually when we were in offices, is actually ask how people are themselves, rather than just jumping into conversations and talking just about the work. It's how are they getting on, because the pandemic's impacted everybody in different ways, professionally and personally. And I think having an appreciation as how it's impacted people as individuals, as well as their teams, as well as their directorates, as well as the work they're doing, gives a much better insight into what's going on in the organisation you work in, rather than just jumping straight in and going, what's this thing that you want? So I think that would be my thing of, really is using the technology to the advantage to continue to check in with people on a personal level, as well as obviously the work that needs to be undertaken.
Interesting, but you've also moved from a non-profit to a for-profit organisation, or you've worked across the piece anyway. What are the key differences, if any, between, for being a BRM in a non-profit and in a for-profit organisation? Is there any difference? Does it really affect the way you work? What other pressures does it bring?
I don't think there's, personally for me, I don't think there's difference in the role itself. I don't think there's a difference in what personal kind of attributes you need to have or what competencies you need to have. I also don't think it's that different in terms of how you deliver the role necessarily, because everybody who comes into business relationship management or business partnering that I've met, it is very much for the good of the organisation. People go in and it's a what's the word? It's an enabling role. It's one of those where it makes people question the norm. It looks at what's being brought in. It brings things together that might not have been brought together. And I think regardless of whether your organisation is turning a profit or not, those things are needed from the relationship perspective of the role to understand what's going on. The big difference is obviously the reason for being. So the purpose, if you're in a private organisation that's for profit, or even I suppose anywhere else, is, the motive for why people might want to do things will be different. So I think the only thing there will be how the work is prioritised. So how work is prioritised might be because that specific margin is dropping and it needs to be increased, or that's not very efficient, and it's then for how it can turn, the bottom line. Whereas when you're in a non-profit, it's more than how you actually utilise the funds that are available and how it works with the strategy. So both of organisations are working towards a strategy. The only difference will be whether the strategy is to make money or to use the money as best as it can. And I think regardless of that, it needs the same sort of thing to bring it together. The other interesting thing to note as well, it's not the case where I work at the moment, but there are a lot of non-profits that actually do need to raise money. So charities, for example, although they're not for profit, they're non-profit. In order to be able to redistribute those funds, they need to raise money. So they will still have requirements that mean that they need to get money in the door to then be able to redistribute it. So it really depends on why an organisation exists, what's its mission and purpose, and what its strategy is. But the actual business relationship management side of it, it's not that dissimilar. You talk to people, you look at the overall strategies that are in place, you look at the work that's coming in, you see how you can help align them, you direct people to talk to other people, you connect people, and I think it's very similar.
Interesting. I also understand that you've got a pretty keen interest in how behavioural changes can make improvements in an organisation. So, how do you think these can support environmental strategy in business?
It's such a big topic, Richard. I think I'm nowhere near an environmental expert, and I think it's a topic that organisations are a lot more aware of now and want to invest in, but aren't 100% sure how to necessarily do it. So I think obviously as an organisation, people can make appropriate steps to look at how they can improve processes and procurement and properties and things. But on a personal level, it's the same as anything really. It's, small changes make big change. And, if everybody does small things and plays a part in it from the environmental piece, it can all add up to benefits. I think, people talk a lot about how technology can support the environmental strategy. So, replacing travel with video conferencing, for example. We have Microsoft, so we have Office 365 within our organisation. It's fully embedded in the organisation. So, can we replace travel with a VC meeting? Can we replace it with a phone call? Even our events with our grant holders and applicants, can they be done in a different way? And then the other side of it is, as we start to talk about returning to offices, making sure that our offices are kitted out appropriately with Teams video conferencing equipment and meeting rooms. So people can sit in their local offices but still have really interactive meetings rather than have to travel between them. So those conscious people behaviours that are then, do I need to travel to do that? Do I need to kind of be there for that? The big one's printing as well. A lot of people who have been working from home during the pandemic haven't had access to printers, or if they have, their personal printers. And I think everyone always had this thing of we can't go paperless. And that's every organisation I've ever spoken to is, oh no, the fear of going paperless. But actually, people have proved that it's possible to reduce the amount of paper that's required to operate as an organisation. And then a really big one, and it's something that I don't think is talked about a lot at all, supply and demand. So although organisations as a whole can do big things, they can partner with more green suppliers or people who've got more resources behind them to look into environmental issues. People on an individual basis, that whole mindset of I'll keep this just in case. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. If everybody keeps all those emails, they keep all those documents, they don't start sharing things through links, they continue to share things as attachments. The amount of storage that's then required to keep all of these things, all adds up. And it's actually like on an individual level, can you start to think, do I need to keep all of this? Because if we require that much storage, we'll keep purchasing that much storage, and that storage will then mean the need for data centers. It will mean the need for other things, where supply and demand on an individual level, it seems like a small thing to say, why don't you just put some time aside to look at your emails? But it could have a big impact in the end. conscious though, and I will caveat all of that because it is a really complex topic, which is working with business need. Obviously compliance, retention, archive, it's not to say to everybody delete everything that you've got to run as an organisation, but it's those little things that people can do within their control that they might not think about that could help in the long term from an environmental strategy perspective.
I mean, that's a fascinating insight. I've often thought about what's the electricity cost of all the backup centres storing all those attachments that have been circulated to many people in the organisation and are never going to be used. So if you think about if you have an attachment of 10 megabytes and you send it to 5 people and they send it to 5 more people and they're storing it in the current, and then it's backed up and then it's archived. And if you actually think about that happening around the world, how much energy is being expended on running those backup centres and cooling those backup centres, basically just to hold a lot of duplicate information.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting comment. It's a fascinating problem, and there must be some way of solving it. And then maybe we could halve the energy demand that we have. Who knows?
Yeah, the data duplication thing is a really big one. The increased use of technology in every aspect of our lives, not just work, means that people are now reliant on more streaming services. They're reliant on more cloud technologies, and I think the big one for me, and it can sound like it's kind of moving the problem, I suppose, depending on how you look at things. Is if the way I say it is if every single organisation that doesn't necessarily have the resources behind them has to manage a data centre, and that data centre has to be cooled to a certain level and in the space that it requires to have it. Whereas if that's then moved to a partnership with a cloud provider like Microsoft, for example, who have resources in place to help support that, it's looking at it in a different way. It's not necessarily getting rid of the problem, but it's putting it where resource can be. Whereas if people thought about what they were doing, I suppose, in a conscious way, because it almost feels, I don't know if you remember, I was talking, as I do, when inboxes were on premise in a lot of organisations, and you'd constantly get that alert that goes, you are close to filling your memory, delete, and then you'd contact the service desk and go, please, can you just make my mailbox a little bit bigger because I can't delete anything. Those sort of prompts did actually get people into the habit of deleting things, whereas now I think because storage is so much more accessible, people maybe have forgotten those behaviours. It's thinking just because the storage exists, should you be keeping the stuff that's utilising that storage? And your example there of a document lifecycle is a brilliant thing, because you're right, you could create it in one space, send it to 10 people. If all those 10 people then save it as well to make comments and send it back with like -HC, and then someone has to collate it for one document, you could potentially have 20 versions sat on inboxes and storage locations. So yeah, things to consider.
Do you think these things are going to have an impact on the BRM role, on the IT partner role? That as you start to think about these things at a corporate level in your conversations with the IT team and the client group, do you think you're going to get into that situation where the environmental, the energy usage, the paper usage, the storage usage is actually going to be part of that initial project discussion, and people are actually going to have an item on the agenda about what are we doing about our environmental policy? Or do you think it's just going to be a natural thing that sort of bubbles up and individuals make their own choices? Can you see it becoming a corporate requirement when you start to scope out what you're doing?
I think, yes, it depends what organisation you work at and what their priorities are. In ours, we have an environmental strategy. It's a strand that runs through. In terms of how it comes about, I think it's going to be like absolutely any initiative that an organisation does, which is, there has to be a catalyst for change somewhere. And I think unless it's really understood by everybody involved, and I think this is a topic that isn't. Like I said, I haven't even scratched the surface on what this could mean for technology moving forward. And there's people who are specialists now in this area to look at this. It has to be one of those where there has to be a conscious effort for it to be built in. I don't think it's necessarily going to find its way if you just rely on one or two people bringing it up. I think it does have to be built in. So, when you go to procure a system, how are you looking at the green credentials of that supplier? But not just that, what's the benchmark? How do you know that their answer is actually any good? Because they could say they've got all these things, but how do you know? And then the other thing is, actually, is there ways to reduce completely what we're doing? And then obviously next to that is, are there ways to reuse and recycle? So looking into it in kind of actually the decisions that are made at an organizational level. I think for business relationship managers moving forward, it's something that organizations can't necessarily shy away from. It's out there so openly now that people need to act on things and organizations need to act. And I think even if you think you're quite a small dot in that space, is actually, as I said, the small changes make the big changes. And I think the role of a BRM in my mind is to challenge that norm. It's to have those conversations where you bring up considerations to people that they might not have thought of themselves. And this is one of those where, as I said, it's something that in my personal life I care about, but in a work life maybe I haven't paid as much attention to it as it could have. But we've all got to start somewhere and try. And if one person can have the conversation and it spurs thought in somebody else, then it's worth having.
There's something you might like to try then. I had an email from a university professor who we're due to meet later in the year. And the question was, do you want to meet physically or do you want to meet online? And he came back and said, let's meet online. That was the recommendation. And he said, because we'll save time and we'll save carbon.
Well,
and it's the first time I've ever seen anyone put in writing that it will save carbon. And it made me think about how much carbon do I use when I come from home to the office.
Yeah.
One small step.
But this is it. It's, something that I've started talking about recently, and it's a very early conversation, is about the co-benefits. And that's not just from environmental, it's everything, which is, there'll be people within every organisation that really care about this topic. There'll be people who don't care about this topic, if we're being blunt. There'll be people who don't know about, so there's ignorance kind of in that space, or naivety. And I think the important piece there is understanding the benefit to individual people. It's with any relationship management or any change management, is what does it mean to the individual? And for some people, you could go, oh, if you do this, it will increase your efficiency. If you do this, you'll save money. If you do this, but then adding on to the end of that, the carbon part of it, it makes that argument much bigger. It's like, we're sitting at home. I'm sitting at home at the moment, for example. It's that thing of, I've made the personal choice to swap my light bulbs out for LED. It's that it's good it's better for the environment, but also it's better for my energy bills. So, there's a financial incentive in it, and it's like traveling in as well. There's that thing of, actually, I'd like to start, and this for my fitness, I suppose, 2 years of sitting at home. When I do start going to the office, I'd like to start cycling into work. Yes, it will take me a lot longer than driving or any other means, but it's one of those where it's for my fitness, but it also has another benefit. So it's these little things where, you can't tell people how to change their personal lifestyle habits, because it's personal choice and people can do what they want. But it is that thing where you go, well, actually, there's more benefits than just the one. And if they're all understood as a collective, it makes you think, and you might align to one over the other. If fitness is important to you, do you want to walk or cycle? If money is important to you, the cost of fuel and maintaining your car and parking at the moment, maybe a bus, but it's those things where they also have a benefit in the kind of carbon hierarchy.
Fascinating. So, as you've been a business partner for a while, or a business relationship manager, when you look back, what would be the three things that you would have liked to have known when you start in your career that you now know? What are the three biggest lessons that you've learned in the period of being a business partner or a business relationship manager?
The first one for me is quite a personal one, and it's really about confidence and self-esteem. Is my first thing that I would have liked to have known, and it's really just about having more confidence in myself and trusting myself. I think when I started in this role, I hadn't had that many years work experience compared to other people. Being quite a young female in an IT world is it's still not quite there. And it's not anything of my organization where I am now, it's just across the sector. And I think if I could go back and talk to myself, it would be actually saying, be confident in yourself, and particularly around questions. I think this is one thing, where you go, I want to ask that question, but I don't want to seem silly. Or you've asked a question and you instantly realise it hasn't landed how you thought it was going to land. Or you ask a question and the answer wasn't the answer you were going to get back. And I think for me, one of the big lessons is actually be confident in why you're asking questions. You are obviously asking questions because you want to know you've got an interest and you want to know the answer. So I think the role of a business relationship manager is to, the we've always done it that way, is actually go, well, why? Does it need to be done that way? Can it be done differently? And although they can be uncomfortable for you to ask and they can be uncomfortable for people to hear, is actually, it's starting a conversation. It's getting other people to think about things differently, not only yourself. The second one for me is, and it links to the Business Relationship Management Institute actually, is around the maturity of an organisation. So one of the things that kind of revolutionized my thinking, I suppose, was seeing the maturity model for the first time. Because until that, I'd been in the role, finding my feet, and feeling at times that I was struggling to progress certain conversations, and I didn't really know where I was. And then I saw that maturity model, and it all just made sense to me. I went, oh, that makes sense. There's steps to take in order to get to where you want to be, and actually accepting that and adapting your own thinking, because it's not about trying to make other people change their thinking immediately. It's your own to go, well, actually, if I'm going and speaking to people at kind of that trusted advisor, strategic partner level, and they aren't ready for that, that's not them, that's me. I need to understand the maturity of the organisation and where they're at, and help take them on that journey with me to understand the benefits of having those conversations, and not just that, but understand what the BRM role is, understanding the maturity, adapting to that, and then identifying kind of to do progressive change. And then the third one, it sounds like a strange thing to say considering the question, because the question is about being in the BRM role. But I think it's actually just knowing that BRM exists. I know it sounds like an interesting, but I think for me, I didn't even know that this was a career. I didn't know that this was a profession. I didn't know it existed. I knew when I left university that I wanted to help people. I volunteered all through university. After leaving, I was academic vice president of the student union. I've always had an interest in helping people, but I wanted to help people in tech. And that was always my alignment. My manifesto aims for being elected were all about technology. I then went to go work in a PMO, which was all about technology and digital transformation. And I didn't know that would actually take me anywhere. I kind of, I went into project management because I thought this is one of the only roles that I can undertake in IT that isn't an administration role, but isn't technical. And I think it's understanding the variety of roles that are available within technology that don't require a explicit technical skill. You need to work with people to build up your technical knowledge, and be able to be that translation service. If someone says something to me now because I've got experience, I know that I can articulate that to someone who knows nothing about it. But it's knowing that it's there and that it's an option, because I think that there could be people out there similar to me who know they want to work in this area, but knowing where to go with it can be a hard career choice. So that would be my other one.
That's fascinating, Hannah. Do you think the BRM role has got a corporate structure? Do you think there is going to be the BRM in the C-suite before long, or do you think it's always going to be below the C-suites, reporting into somebody?
I mean, there's business partners in lots of different areas. There's business partners in technology, in HR, or people, however they call them, finance. And I think it really does, again, depend on where they position themselves, because actually it's that bit of I personally see it as a progression into those roles if you want to go to that place. There will always be a hierarchy and a structure in place where a BRM reports to somebody else. I mean, the Institute might have a different opinion, but my personal thing is if you as an individual from a career aspiration perspective want to progress into that role, it's more likely that you'd end up actually going for a CIO or a CEO or, a COO role from a business relationship manager role rather than it sitting in the same structure. And the reason for that is because I think not only do business relationship managers work with their business partners and they work with their directors and kind of the C-suite, is actually they're working back into it that way as well. So it is that you are a trusted advisor and strategic partner to your C-suite. So if you sit in it, it's actually that means that you are a decision maker within that space, and maybe actually the step for that is a progression one rather than actually sitting there. But I think having advocacy at that level and having sponsorship and people believing in the role at that level is absolutely critical, because otherwise you end up having the aspiration for the role existing, but the actual execution of it might not go where you want it to actually go if you don't have the buy-in. So yeah, day-to-day kind of working is on you, but the reason that you're there is because of the C-suite.
Excellent. Hannah, thank you very much for your time. I'm sure it's very busy for you at work at the moment. So thanks for finding the time to talk to me. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. I'm always happy to share information where I can. If anybody's interested in anything that I have said, or they want to get in touch, or maybe even if they're early careers in this space, then I'm also more than happy for people to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And I'll help where I can. But it's been a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. We're always keen to hear your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. You can find all the information in the show notes below. Please visit apmg-international.com to find out more about our accredited training and the certifications that support them that are related to the topics discussed in this series. I hope you've enjoyed today, and I look forward to you joining future episodes while we continue our exploration into best practice and the benefits it brings to global business. Thank you.